Shalom, giving all praises to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachahakodash. Double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders at Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations as always to the elect. And this is going to be part 2, all right, dealing with the holy day, Hannukah, all right, Hannukah, all right, or Hanak, which is the Feast of Dedication. And in part 1, we went into some history, but I didn't want to make the video too long, so I'm going to break it up into 2 parts. And we're going to start here again at 1 Maccabees, the 1st chapter, and the 59th verse, all right? And the book of Maccabees is contained in the Apocrypha, which means sent away, hidden. And ultimately, history contained in the Apocrypha is history, all right, associated with the Greek Empire that you must know in order to understand the New Testament. Again, Christianity or anti-Christians, all right, they run around with a doctrine, based upon skipping a whole beast, as Daniel, the 7th chapter, speaks of the 4 beasts, which would track, the captivity of the Jews, the Israelites, and the Jews, the 12 tribes of Israel, as they will be scattered. It's very important to understand that you can't jump from the book of Malachi to the book of Matthew, all right? And again, as we showed you, okay, these different captivities, all right, from the time of Solomon's kingdom being rent, to the Assyrian captivity, to the Babylonian captivity, to the Greek captivity, lead to the Roman captivity, which is where Yahushua comes on the scene and where you get the book of Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, eventually Acts. You must understand what took place in the Greek Empire, okay, to understand, okay, the history and what you're reading in the New Testament. We'll get back to that, but again, we'll start here. 1 Maccabees chapter 1 and 59, it says, on the 25th of the month, the same evil people offered sacrifices on pagan altars erected to the top of the altar in the temple. So basically the temple was raided. Okay, many sellout Israelites were starting to regulate wicked sacrifices being performed in the temple. They built a gym where they were exercising naked. That's where you get the word gym. It goes back to the Greek word, all right, naked, okay, which the Greeks did things like that. They worked out naked, okay, and that legacy continues here today. Although you go to the gym and you see, the women are pretty much naked, all right, but in times past, they wouldn't have those tights on, okay. They would literally be naked, men and women. And Jake got into those practices, man. Israelites had become Greeked out and had then become what? Heathen. And again, they raised their children as heathen, and their children raised their children as heathen. So for hundreds of years leading into the New Testament, as we're going to show you, though there were some who stood and stuck to the traditions and laws in ancient Israel, there were a lot who didn't. Okay, so verse 60 says, mothers who had allowed their babies to be circumcised, and we're reading out of the GNT, were put to death in accordance with the king's decree. Their babies were hung about their necks and their families, and those who had circumcised them were put to death. But many people in Israel firmly resisted the king's decree and refused to eat food that was ritually unclean. They prefer rather to die rather than to break the holy covenant and eat unclean food, and many did die. Okay, and see, when Yahushua came on the scene, he was born to one of these families who ultimately were raised sticking to the traditions, man. That's why they were called the circumcision. That's why Yahushua was circumcised on the 8th day. John the Baptist circumcised the 8th day. They were raised to families who stuck to the traditions, and there were many families around that were broken up into different camps or sects: the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Essenes, okay, the Zealots. These were Jews who stuck to the traditions. And when Yahushua came on the scene, he gathered from amongst them. This is why Peter, as a matter of fact, let's get an example of that. When he didn't understand the vision that was given unto him, okay, this is the book of Acts, the 10th chapter, and the 11th verse. And I saw heaven open with a certain vessel descend unto him, and it had been a great sheet at the four corners, symbolizing the Israelites scattered and let down to the earth, and wherein there were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, all right, and fowls of the air. Okay? Now, what this symbolizes, real quick, let's get the book of Ezekiel, the 8th chapter. What this is symbolizing is Israel in a heathen-like state. All right, this is the book of Ezekiel, the 8th chapter, and the 10th verse. It says, "So I went and beheld every form of creeping thing and abominable beast, and all the idols of the house of Israel portrayed round about." Okay? Ezekiel was shown a vision of what evil the leadership of his people had been doing, and he likened them unto creeping things and abominable beasts and idols that the house of Israel ultimately were worshiping. Okay? So going back, ultimately we know as time goes on, a lot of these Israelites who were raised in those customs eventually were awakened and came back into the fold through the preaching of Yahushua, through whom his blood, their sins can be covered from the condemnation that came with that first covenant. This is what's happening. So here, Acts 10 and 12, wherein were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts and creeping things, and fowls of the air. And there came a voice to him, saying unto Peter, "Rise, kill, and eat." See? So a lot of people associate this with, Peter being told to eat unclean food, which that's not what this represents. Okay? Why would the Lord awaken Peter to tell him to eat worms, go eat a horse? No. That's not what this is talking about, man. This is ultimately the Gentiles who had been associated with heathen, who had been associated with idols, who had been associated with all of these reprobate things, were now getting ready to be brought back into the fold and have fellowship with those of the circumcision who stuck to the traditions, man. Because the advantage of those who stuck to the circumcision was they were there, all right, to give the breakdowns, all right, and they were walking with Yahushua. Yahushua's hardcore following came from amongst the circumcision, those who were raised in the customs. As the prophecy said, the tents of Judah had to be raised up first. Okay? So Peter, who's the head of the circumcision, is now being told to rise, kill, and eat. But when he didn't understand the vision, listen to what he said. But Peter said, "Not so, Lord. I have never eaten anything common or unclean." Okay? Now, when you read it in the NLT, what does it say? "No, Lord," Peter declared, "I have never eaten anything that our Jewish laws have declared impure or unclean." See? See that? Why? Because he belonged to a family that ultimately stuck to the traditions, man. Okay? He was actually a follower of John the Baptist before he became a follower of Yahushua. And John the Baptist was born to a family of priests who were in the temple, who were descendants of Aaron. So Peter was raised as a Jew. He was raised in his culture. He was a natural branch. He was cultivated. And the proof this ain't talking about men, or talking about actual food, and it's talking about men being converted, because you have to understand the common narrative centered around these scattered Israelites at this time that were raised as heathen is that they were no longer a people of the Lord, man. So let's jump down to verse. All right, but let's read this and then we'll jump down. But Peter said, "No, Lord, I have never eaten anything that our Jewish laws have declared impure or unclean." And Yahushua spake a second time and said, "What God hath cleansed, call thou not common." So was it unclean food that he cleansed? Or was it the Gentiles who were going to be what? Purified by the washing of the water of the word and covered through Yahushua's blood. Acts 10 and 28. And he said, "You know how that it is unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come to one of another nation." See, and again, when you go into this in the Greek, and see, we're getting ready to read the history that led to this friction between the two. He that is a Jew, which is a Jew, is what? Yahwadah, Jew belonging to the Jewish nation, Jewish as respects of birth, origin, or religion. This was the circumcision, right? To come unto one of another nation. Okay, the word another nation, aluphalos, means foreign. Okay, they weren't born in Jerusalem, and better yet, they were born and raised as heathen. But the word allos means another. Philos means what? Tribe. In the New Testaments, all persons descending from one of the sons of the 12 patriarchs of Jacob. So these heathen, these Israelites who weren't raised as Jews, were looked at as a no people. Okay? That's why Peter said you were once not a people, but now are the people of the Most High through your faith in what was being taught. Okay? And he said, "Know ye that is unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or to come unto one of another nation." Basically, they looked at those Israelites as they weren't even a part of the nation. "But God have showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean." See that? It wasn't talking about food. Anyway, the point that I brought that out is that Peter lets you know that he's never eaten anything off according to the law because he stemmed from one of these families. 1 Maccabees 1 and 62, "But many people in Israel firmly resisted the king's decree and refused to eat food that was ritually unclean. They preferred rather to die rather than to break the holy covenant and eat unclean food, and many did die. In his anger, God made Israel suffer terribly." So that leads us to 1 Maccabees, the 2nd chapter. All right. Whereas you have the faithfulness of Mattathias. Okay. During that time, as many of the Jews were going off, Antiochus makes this decree, that you had to follow his customs and can't follow your own. Right. It says, during that time, a priest of Jehoiarib, family named Mattathias, was the son of John, the grandson of Simeon, moved from Jerusalem and settled in Modin. So first, let's look up this particular, name so that you can know a little bit about this history. All right. Jehoiarib was the head of a family of priests, which was made the first of 24 priest divisions organized by King David. Okay. So the Maccabees, are descendants of a family who was set up, once King David set up his kingdom, he set up the priest in their different courses, man. Okay. Which, let's see what we can find. That's found in 1 Chronicles 24 and 7. Let's get that in the Bible. Let's get 1 Chronicles. Okay, we got to know these things, right? 24 and 7. This is when David divided the Levites in their order. All right, now the first lot came forth of Jehoiarib. All right, the second to Jedediah. All right. So let's look up this name so we can know what it means. Yah Ra Yah Yorad. Yah. All right. Wa Yah Ra Yad. All right. Yahweh contends. And that's what the Maccabees did. They contended, man. Priest in Jerusalem, the head of the first of the 24th courses of the priest in David's time. Okay, just like there's an order in the heavens. The David, once he got his kingdom, he set up an order of priest on earth. Okay, point blank period, man. I believe that's in the book of Revelation. Yep, Revelation 4:4. 20 and 4 throne, NLT. 20 and 4 thrones surrounded him, and 24 elders sat on them. They were all clothed in white and had gold crowns on their heads. So just like there was an order, there's an order in the heavens. All right, that order was set up on earth with the priests by King David. But this particular family, okay, would eventually lead, okay, to the Maccabees. See? So during that time, okay, a priest of Jehoiarab, of the family of Jehoiarab, named Mattathias, who was the son of John, a grandson of Simeon, moved from Jerusalem and settled in Moedin. Mattathias had 5 sons. All right, John, also called Gaddai, Simon, also called Thassi, Judas, also called Maccabeus, which I believe means hammer, Eleazar, also called Avaron, and Jonathan, also called Apis. All right. When Mattathias saw all the sins that were being committed in Judea and Jerusalem, he said, "Why was I born to see these terrible things? The ruin of my people and of the holy city. Must I sit here helpless while the city is surrendered to enemies? The temple falls into the hand of foreigners. The temple is like someone without honor. Its splendid furnishings have been carried away as loot. Our children have been killed in the streets. Our young men by the sword of an enemy. Every tribe in the world has occupied the city and robbed her of her possessions. All her ornaments have been stripped away. She is now a slave and no longer free. Look at our temple profaned by the Gentiles, emptied of all its splendor. Why should I go on living?" He was like, wow. Remember, he comes from a family of priests who stem from at the time of King David. Once the throne was reestablished in Jerusalem, ultimately he stems from that family who ultimately was set up in their courses to serve in the temple. That order was still being followed at the time that John the Baptist came on the scene, which is why his family, all right, were in the temple. His father, Zechariah, was in the temple, but that's another history for another time. It says, in their grief, Mattathias and his sons, all right, while again, you have a falling away, you have many Israelites who were like, shit, I'm down with Antiochus, let's eat swine, let's sacrifice swine, let's not be circumcised. You have this remnant of Jews, all right, who belong to the tribe of Loya, okay, Levi, like, hell nah. So they start mourning. They went back into their customs. They said, verse 15, then the king's officials who were forcing people to turn from God came to the town of Moedin to force the people there to offer pagan sacrifices. And when you look up Moedin, let's look that up just so you can see it. It's an actual city. Today, the high is 64, the low is 46. Okay. But when you go into the history, Moedin Maccabeum, root, all right, showing you that this town is still associated with what the Maccabees did, man. Okay. But it's a town in Israel. Okay. It says this place was the origin of the Maccabees, the rebels who were Jews who freed Judea from the rule of the Seleucid Empire, established the Hasmonean dynasty. See, if you don't understand this history, you're not going to understand the New Testament. Point blank, period. Okay? But we'll get back to that. Many, all right, First Maccabees 2 and 16, many of the Israelites came to meet them, including Mattathias and his son and the king's official. This is what they told Mattathias. You are a respected leader in this town. You have the support of your sons and relatives. Why not be the first one here to do what the king has commanded? So the black boule came to Mattathias like, look, bro, stop. These niggas got power. They're killing us, bro. Just do it. Just, bro, sacrifice to the idols, man, so we can just have our little, so we can chill. All right. Why not be the first one here to do what the king has commanded? All the Gentiles and the people of Judea and all of the people left in Jerusalem have already done so. If you do, you and your sons will be honored with the title of the friends of the king. And you will be rewarded with silver and gold and many gifts, man. These are your modern day, all right, buck dancing Christians, all right? Israelites who follow Christianity and want you to bow to the king and not stir up any friction. Mattathias answered in a loud voice, I don't care if every Gentile in his empire has obeyed the king and yielded to the commandment and abandoned the religion of his ancestors. My children, my relatives, and I will continue to keep the covenant that God made with our ancestors. With God's help, we will never abandon his law or disobey his commands. We will not obey the king's decree, and we will not change our ways, all right, of the worship in the least. And again, this eventually led to the Hasmonean dynasty, man. Okay? Which this is where you get the scribes, the Pharisees, the Essenes, the zealots. Okay? These were the Jews who stuck to the traditions. Many have started to sell out. Okay? But this is how you have Jews who stuck to the traditions when Yahushua came on the scene. And the fourth beast, the Roman Empire. If you don't understand this history, you're not going to understand the Bible. Okay? Again, you can't skip a whole beast in Daniel, the 7th chapter, and think you're going to understand the fourth beast. No. So he said, we're not going to change our ways of worship. Just as Mattathias was speaking, one of the men from Modin decided to obey the king's decree and stepped out in front of everyone to offer a pagan sacrifice on the altar that stood there. When Mattathias saw him, he became angry enough to do what had to be done. Shaking with rage, he ran forward and killed the man right there on the altar. He also killed the royal official who was forcing the people to sacrifice when he tore down the altar. In this way, Mattathias showed his deep devotion to the law, just as Phineas had done when he killed Zimri, the son of Salu. And that, you go back to Numbers to read that, So these were, again, this is the tension between those who kept the laws and those who were raised as heathen. They were putting them to death. So when you read in the New Testament, the Jews were like, nigga, why are you bringing heathen into the temple? The Jews were like, these Gentiles can't come in unless they be circumcised. It stems from this. The guerrilla warfare of Mattathias. Then Mattathias, all right, went through the town shouting, everyone who is faithful to God's covenant and obeys his laws, follow me. With this, he and his sons fled to the mountains, leaving behind all that they owned. At that time, many of the Israelites who were seeking to be right with God through obedience to the law went out to live in the wilderness, taking their children, their wives, and their livestock with them because of the terrible oppression that they were suffering. So this was a remnant of men, women, and children who stuck to the traditions, man. Again, synonymously, you have those who didn't stick to the traditions. The report soon reached the king's officials and the soldiers in the fort at Jerusalem that some men who had defied the king's command had gone into hiding in the wilderness. A large force of soldiers pursued them, caught up with them, and set up a camp opposite to them, prepared to attack them. This is still a time. There is still time, they shouted out to the Jews. Come out and obey the king's command, and we will spare your lives. So they were hounding those who were sticking to the traditions, man. Circumcising their children. We will not come out, they answered. We will not obey the king's command. We will not profane the Sabbath. The soldiers attacked them immediately, but the Jews did nothing to resist. They did not even throw their stones or block the entrances in the caves they were hiding. They said, we will all die with a clear conscience. Let heaven and earth be witness that you are slaughtering us unjustly. So the enemy attacked them on the Sabbath and killed them, their wives and their children and their livestock. Okay, because on the Sabbath you can't fight. You're not supposed to do anything. So ultimately the heathen knew, all right, let's get them on the Sabbath. When Mattathias and his friends heard of the news, they were greatly saddened and said one to another, if all of us do as other Jews have done and refuse to fight the Gentiles and to defend our lives and our religion, we will soon be wiped off the face of the earth. So he had to make a judgment in the spirit. Okay, would being faithful to the law and not fighting on the Sabbath be beneficial at that point? No. He had to make a decision outside of the law that led to life. Okay, because if we keep not fighting on the Sabbath, they just go wait till the Sabbath and attack us and kill everybody. On that day, they decided that if anyone attacked them on the Sabbath, they would defend themselves so that they would not all die as other Jews had died in the caves. Then Mattathias and his friends were joined by a group of devout, patriotic Jews, the strongest and bravest, all right, men in Israel, who had all volunteered to defend the law. In addition, everyone who was fleeing from the persecution joined and strengthened their forces. Now they had an army. See? They gave vent to their anger by attacking the renegade Jews. Okay? So they were putting the Jews to death. As a matter of fact, let's see if I thought I had it. Let me see. I'll bring it up. Give me 1 second. All right. There's some history. It says, after Mattathias' death, this is on Wikipedia, about 1 year later in 166 BCE, his son Judas Maccabeus led a band of Jewish dissidents that would eventually observe other groups opposed to the Seleucid rule and grow into an army. While unable to directly strike Seleucid power at first, Judas's forces could maraud the countryside and attack Hellenized Jews, of whom there were many. See, so they were putting to death Hellenized Jews. See? And see, this is why under Yahushua it says there is neither Jew nor Greek. Because the common history, all right, tied to these Hellenized Jews and these Jews who kept the laws was ultimately friction, man. But see, in Yahushua, those particular Jews who were scattered and Hellenized eventually can come back into the fold, man. Okay, the word Hellenized means what? To adopt Greek culture, religion, language, and identity by non-Greeks. And the Jews, okay, followed these things. But again, as we're reading, Judas's forces, okay, they were putting to death and attacking Hellenized Jews. They were destroying Greek altars and forcibly circumcising boys, burnt villages, and drove Hellenized Jews off their land. See that? So this is a history that you have to really understand to understand the Bible. Okay? If you don't understand this history, you're going to read the New Testament and see the friction between the circumcision and the uncircumcision. And you're going to be like, hell nah. Again, this is why when you get into the history, when these Gentiles, these Israelite foreigners started to come back into the fold, started with Cornelius. This is why when you get Acts 11, okay, and 1, okay, let's start at NLT. Soon news reached the apostles and other believers in Judea that the Gentiles, okay, had received the word of God. But when Peter arrived back in Jerusalem, the Jewish believers criticized him. You entered into the homes of Gentiles and even ate with them? Ate with them? Again, this is talking about what? You wentest into men uncircumcised, basically those scattered Israelites who had been raised as heathen. Call Allah Yahweh Shem Yahshua 144. The word for uncircumcision,
Strong's G203, akrabustia. Akrabustia.
having the foreskin uncircumcised, a Gentile, a condition in which the corrupt desires of the rooted in the flesh were not yet extinct. So they were raised as complete heathen. See? So in times past, Judas Maccabeus was in his family, they were putting these people to death. So by the time you get to the Yahushai, okay, where things had settled, these Jews who were raised as Jews, they looked at the Gentiles as if they were not even a people. Okay? Let's get that. And who's Peter writing this letter to? Let's get 1 Peter's 1 real quick. 1 Peter's 1 and 1. Peter, an apostle of Yahushai, the Messiah, to the scattered strangers scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, Bithynia. Okay, let's look up the word scattered. And John Calvin agrees with this vocab. The word scattered is diaspora, dispersion. Israelites dispersed among foreign nations, man. Of the followers of Yahushua scattered abroad among the Gentiles. And they were coming out of that idol worship. And through Yahushua's sacrifice, they can now be brought back into the fold. So Peter, an apostle of Yahushua, to the scattered elect strangers throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia, elect according to the foreknowledge, all right, of God. And see, these particular regions were conquered by the Greeks and the Romans, man. And many Israelites fell away to their idols. But see, many of those Israelites would eventually wake up, just as we did, elect according to the foreknowledge of God the Father through the sanctification of the Spirit unto obedience and sprinkling of the blood of Yahushua, grace and peace be multiplied unto you. See, because they were obedient to the word as they had been taught. It was the Jews who taught them this word. Again, when you let's get Romans 3 real quick. Okay, Romans, the 3rd chapter, in the 1st verse. Okay, it says, then what is the advantage of being a Jew? Is there any value of the ceremony of circumcision? Yes, there are great benefits. First, all the Jews were entrusted with the revelation of God. Ultimately, they had the breakdowns. They had the oracles. All right? They had to be around to ultimately be followers of Yahushua, to have the breakdown to give to the Gentiles as they went out preaching, man. Point blank period. So there was an advantage to being of the circumcision as long as you followed Yahushua, man. And many of the Jews didn't want to follow Yahushua. But going back to 1 Peter chapter 2 and 9. But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth praises of him that called you out of darkness into this marvelous light, which in times past were not a people. See? But now are the people of God, which had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. Dearly beloved, I beseech you as strangers and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. See that? In times past, you were not a people. You once had no identity. But see, as it says in the book of Ephesians, okay, Ephesians 2:11, wherefore remember that ye being in times past Gentiles in the flesh, who were called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands, that being at that time, so they were called uncircumcision, they were called a no people by those who were raised as the people, that at that time ye were without Yahushua, being aliens to the commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope. See, but now in Yahushua, ye who were sometimes were afar off are made nigh by the blood of Yahushua. See, so the Gentiles could be brought back in contrary to the law, but through faith in who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, which those of the circumcision that believed on him went preaching him. See, and among every nation where the scattered Israelites were, they could be accepted back in through believing in that message. Okay, but let's stick to the point of the lesson, and we'll get up out of here. Okay. First Maccabees chapter 2. All right. And 42. Then Mattathias and his friends were joined by a group of devout patriotic Jews. This is the history. The strongest and bravest men in Israel, who had volunteered to defend the law. In addition, everyone who was fleeing from the persecution joined them and strengthened their forces. Now, they had an army. They gave vent to their anger by attacking the renegade Jews. See, they attacked them. They looked at eventually, they said they aren't Jews. They ain't the people of the Lord. Those who escaped were forced to flee to the Gentiles for safety. Mattathias and his friends went everywhere, tearing down pagan altars and circumcising by force every circumcised boy they found within the borders of Israel. Did not Paul circumcise Timothy? See? Titus didn't get circumcised, but again, circumcision is not the standard of what makes you right with the Most High, man. It's an inward circumcision, an inward, all right, cutting off. All right, it says they were also successful in hunting down arrogant Gentile officials. They rescued the law of Moses from the Gentiles and their kings and broke the power of the wicked King Antiochus. When Mattathias passed away, he said to his sons, these are the times of violence and distress. Arrogant people are in control and have made us an object of ridicule. Speaking of those black boule, those sellouts, man. Okay? But you, my sons, must be devoted to the law and ready to die to defend God's covenant with our ancestors. Remember what our ancestors did and how much they accomplished in their day. Follow their example, and you will be rewarded with great glory and undying fame. Remember how Abram put his trust in the Lord. See, he went to the precepts, man. He went to the stories, man, and we do the same thing. And was tested, and how the Lord was pleased with him and accepted him. Joseph, in his time of trouble, obeyed God's command and became ruler over the land of Egypt. Phineas, our ancestor, because of his burning devotion, was given a promise that his descendants would always be priests. Joshua was made a judge in Israel because he obeyed the command of Moses. Caleb brought back a good report to the community and was given a part of land as a reward. David was made king and was given the promise that his descendants would always be kings because of his steadfast loyalty to God. Okay, Elijah, because of his great devotion to the law, was taken up into heaven, just like Enoch, which means dedicated. all right, or learned man. It says, because of his great devotion to the law, was taken up into heaven. Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael were saved from the flames because they had faith. Daniel was a man of integrity, and these are all Israelites he's talking about. Of course, Abraham wasn't an Israelite, but he belonged to the lineage of the Hebrews. The Hebrews, which eventually became Israelites. That lineage, man, okay, that descended from Adam through Seth, through Enos, who then began men to call on the name of the Lord, man. From Enoch, Methuselah, all the way up to Noah, who had Shem, who had Arphaxad, which would lead to Peleg, Eber, and so forth, man. We belong to that lineage, man. That's the chosen lineage that would lead to Abraham, who had Isaac and Jacob, man. Okay, it says, take each of these ancestors. It says, Daniel was a man of integrity, and the Lord rescued him from the mouth of lions. Take each of these ancestors of ours as an example, and you will realize that no one who puts their trust in the Lord will lack strength. Don't be afraid of the threats of a wicked man. Remember that today he will die. All right, it says, don't be afraid of the threats of wicked man. Of a wicked man. Remember that he will die, and all his splendor will end with worms feeding on his decaying body. Now, that actually took place when you go to Antiochus' death. Let's see if I can pull it up here. Second Maccabees. Let's go to Second Maccabees, the 9th chapter. It says, Second Maccabees 9:5, but the Lord my Almighty and God of Israel smote him, Antiochus, with an incurable plague, or as soon as he had spoken these words, a pain of bowels, there was a remediless, all right, that came upon him, a sore torments in his inner part. Okay? And that most justly for he had torment with other men's bowels, all right, with many strange torments. So he had like a colon cancer, man. Okay? But as you read, verse 8, and thus he had a little aforethought he might command the waves of the sea. So proud was he beyond the condition of man. Antiochus was proud as hell, and weighed the high mountains in the balance, was now cast to the ground and carried into a horse litter, showing forth unto all the manifest power of the Most High, so that the worms rose up out of his body of this wicked man. All right. And whiles he lived in sorrow and pain, his flesh fell away, and filthiness of his smell was noisome to all his army. So he was stanking. And the man who thought a little afore he could reach to the stars of heaven, just like Esau, no man could endure to carry his intolerable stink. So he had worms coming out of his body, man. His body started to decay and eat away at himself. And when you go into the history, okay, his death, the cause of his death was disease, man. And that's recorded in the Apocrypha. Point blank, period. Okay? Let's go back to where we were. And we go skim through the rest of this history, but it's very good. All right? So Mattathias prophesied what would actually happen to Antiochus in his rebellion, man. That he would be given, worms would be feeding on his decaying body. It says, today he will be highly honored, but tomorrow he will disappear and his body will return to the earth and his scheming will come to an end. This is what's coming to you Edomites too, man. But you, my sons, be strong and courageous in defending the law, because it is the law, all right, through the law that you will earn great glory. And that was at the time that the first covenant was still standing. Okay, it says, your brother Simon is wise, so always listen to him as you would me. Judas, all right, Maccabeus has been strong all his life, who will be your commander and lead you in battle against the enemy. Call everyone who obeys God's law to rally around you. Then avenge the wrongs done to your people. Pay back the Gentiles for what they have done, and always obey the law and his commands. Then Mattathias gave himself a blessing and died. He was buried in the family tomb at Moedin, all right, Modein, and all the people of Israel went into a deep mourning for him. This happened in the year 146. All right, so when you get the third chapter, First Maccabees 3, it gives the victories of Judah, man. Judah Maccabees took the place of his father Mattathias, and all his brothers and all loyal supporters of his father gave him their support, and they were happy to carry on Israel's war. Judas brought great glory to his people. In his armor, he was like a giant. Okay? He was like David. He was like a mighty man. He took up his weapons and went to war. All right? With his own sword defended he his camp. He was like a ferocious lion roaring as it attacked. Judas hunted down those who broke the law. See that? We got to keep showing you that this is the reason many of those of the circumcision were like hell nah when it came to the uncircumcision, because they come from a family of history who stuck to the traditions, man. See that? So they were calling those uncircumcised Israelites heathen. They were calling them a no people, man. This is why Peter was told to rise, kill, and eat, basically, and take in a new way of thinking. These people, okay, are going to be brought in through the blood of Yahweh Shai. These Gentiles can be covered with even all of the sins they did. They could be covered and brought in through Yahweh Shai, man. See that? So Yahweh Shai's hardcore following came from these families that stuck to the laws, man, stuck to the traditions. Okay, the tents of Judah had to be raised up first. But see, it was all centered around him. Anyway, it says he hunted down all those who broke the law and set fire all those who oppressed his people. In fear of him, lawless men huddled together in terror, knowing not which way to turn. And see, in spirit, this is what we're doing. We're doing this now, and ultimately now vocab is here. Like, oh shit, we got to do something about these guys. He made life miserable for many kings. He brought joy to the people of Israel. We will praise him forever for what he did. And this is why we're in his holy day. Okay? We went through the towns of Judea and destroyed all the godless men. He relieved Israel of its terrible suffering. His fame spread to the ends of the earth. He gathered those together who were threatened with death, man. Just like David did. Okay? So you can read the history of how certain Greeks and heathen were like trying to come up against him, but ultimately he was smiting their ass, man. The Lord was with him and his army. Okay? So you can read that history. Okay? It's all kind of history and things you can read in this chapter, man. Okay? Yeah, here's a point where these Gentiles came with so many people that the Judas's army was like, well, what are we going to do? All right. Let's see here. Jumping down to verse 50. Lord, what shall we do with these things? Where shall we take them now that our holy temple has been trampled and profaned by the Gentiles? And your priests mourn in disgrace. The Gentiles have come to attack and destroy us. You know what they plan to do. If you don't help us, how can we stand up against them? And this is what we saying. Then they blew trumpets and shouted loudly. After that, Judas divided his men into groups of 10, 50, and 100, and 1,000, placing officers in charge of each group. Then, in obedience to the law, he sent home everyone that had recently been married. Okay, because in our law, if you had recently got married, you was going to be in war thinking about your woman, so it's best you don't go to war. After some time, then you could enter back into combat. It says, built a house, planted a vineyard, and as well as someone who was afraid. Finally, the army marched out and took up position south of Emmaus, where Judas said unto them, prepare yourselves for the battle and be courageous. Be ready tomorrow to fight these Gentiles who have joined forces to attack us and destroy our temple. It is better for us to die fighting than to stand idly, all right, and watch the destruction of our nation and our temple, but the Lord will do what he pleases, man. And this is the mindset of the elect in these times, man. through the blood of Yahweh Shai. Okay, hey, we're not taking that charagma. We'd rather die than to sit there and allow this man to put things inside of our temple, man. But anyway, going to the final chapter, and then we'll close this out. Like, and Lord willing, we'll get into some news and some prophecy. All right, because Jake want to know what's going on. All right, but it's good to know this history too, as we're in this holy day. You know, I mean, brothers get together, you know, and do it to the best of our ability. We always giving to one another anyway, because pretty much instead of Christmas, you have Hannukah, where you can give gifts to one another, be merry, eat, drink, you know, but we're still in war. You know, we're still at war. So it's hard to fully enjoy it, but we do these things to the best of our ability, man. Okay. It says, and Gorgias took 500 infantry, 1,000, yada. And you can read this history. Let's see here. And the Lord was dealing with him, man. This is what Judas told his men. First Maccabees 4:8. But Judas said to his men, don't worry about the size of their army. Don't be frightened when they attack. Remember how our ancestors were saved at the Red Sea when the king of Egypt was pursuing his army. Which one body, they're no longer one body, Yahweh Shah. They say that didn't really happen. Moses didn't really part the Red Sea. That would be witchcraft. Now let us ask the Lord to have mercy on us. And see, what one body and a lot of these guys represent is they want you to bow, all right, like these other Gentiles had our people bowing, man. They were basically the black boule of their day. All right, these niggas are back telling us, you know, don't hate the enemy, you know, bow to him. They can be accepted in, while they're trying to destroy us, man. And the rest of you clowns, man. That's why the Lord has always left a remnant, man. Because without the remnant, we fall to what the rest of Jake was doing. See? It says, now let us ask the Lord to have mercy on us. Let us pray that he will honor his covenant with our ancestors and crush this army when they attack us today. Then all the Gentiles will know that Israel has a God who rescues and saves them. Okay. Let's see here. I mean, you can read this history. I mean, read it on your own. We can't give you everything in these videos. Read the history. But these heathen had their mighty armies, man. 6,000, 5,000. Meanwhile, Judas got only 3,000, who he had to split into different fractions, man. Okay? As you can see here, they got 60,000, and Judas, all right, had 10,000, as you see here. When Judas saw how strong the enemy's army was, he prayed. See, he prayed to the Lord. We will praise you, O Savior of Israel. You broke the attack of the giant by the hand of your servant David, and you let Saul's son Jonathan and the young men who carried his weapons defeat the entire Philistine army. Now, in the same way, all right, and Judas has a lot of symbolism with David. It says, in the same way, you let our people defeat our enemies, put them to shame in spite of all their confidence, and then their infantry and cavalry. Make them afraid. Let their bold strength melt away. Let them tremble. All right, and at the prospect of defeat, we love and worship you. So let us kill our enemies, that we may sing praises in your name. So the battle began in hand-to-hand fighting, as the scriptures say, in times past. You know, what's that in Isaiah, the 9th chapter? Let's get that. Isaiah 9:5, for every battle of the warrior is with confused noise and garments rolled in blood, but this shall be with burning and fuel of fire. So in times past, this is how wars were fought. Okay, hand-to-hand combat. Okay. It says, while Asaias, all right, which, let's look him up real quick. There's a few people with that name, but again, these are actual people, man. Okay? You could look him up. But anyway, Salakia, let's go back. Lysaeus saw that his army was being defeated when he saw the reckless courage of Judas and his men, who showed that they were ready to live and die with honor. He returned to Antioch. There he recruited some mercenaries and planned to return to Judea with an even larger army. Okay, purification of the temple. Judas and his brothers said, "Now our enemies have been defeated. Let us go to Jerusalem to purify the temple and rededicate it." So the whole army, so the whole army was assembled and went up to Mount Zion, where they found the temple abandoned, the altar profaned, and the gates burned down, and the courtyards, all right, grown up with forests and weeds, and the priest rooms torn down. In their sorrow, they tore their clothes, cried loudly, and threw ashes on their heads, and fell down on the ground. When the signal was given on the trumpets, everyone cried out loud. Then Judas ordered some of his soldiers to attack the men in the fort while they purified the temple. He chose some priests who were qualified and devoted to the law. They purified the temple and took the stones they had defiled and put them in an unclean place. Okay? They discussed what should have been done with the altar of burnt offerings, which had been desecrated by the Gentiles. All right? Offering swine and doing their wickedness, having orgies. They did all of that in our temple, man. Okay? By the Gentiles, who decided to tear it down so that it would not stand, as there were a monument to their shame. So they tore down the altar and put stones in a suitable place on the temple hill. Yeah, stones ain't wicked. It's just that the left hand used them to practice witchcraft. But overall, they're a part of our culture. It says, where they will be kept until a prophet shall appear and decide what to do with them. They then took uncut stones, as the law of Moses required, and they built a new altar like the old one, and repaired the temple inside and out, and dedicated its courtyards. They made new utensils for worship and brought the lampstand and altar of incense. Okay, because we burn incense in our culture. It's not witchcraft to burn incense. It says, in the table for the bread in the temple. Okay, they burn, and these are all things associated with that first covenant. They burnt incense upon the altar and lit lamps upon the lampstand, and there was a light in the temple. They placed loaves of bread on the table, hung the curtains, and completed all the work. The 25th day of the month of Kislev in the year 148 was the anniversary of the day the Gentiles had desecrated the altar. See that? It says, on that day was a sacrifice offered on the new altar in accordance to the law of Moses. The new altar was dedicated with hymns were sung to the accompaniment of harps, flutes, and cymbals. All the people bowed with their faces to the ground and worshiped and praised the Lord for giving them victory. For 8 days, they celebrated the rededication of the altar with great joy and burnt offerings and allowed fellowship offering, all right, and thank offerings. They decorated the front temple with gold crowns and shields and rebuilt the gates in the priest rooms and put them on doors. Now that the Jews had removed the shame that the Gentiles had brought, they had a great celebration. Then Judas and his brothers and the entire community of Israel decreed that the rededication of the altar should be celebrated with a festival of joy and gladness at that same time each year, beginning on the 25th of the month of Kislev, lasting 8 days. See that? A festival of joy and gladness, man. See? Then they built high walls, okay, and strong towers. As a matter of fact, let's read this part in the King James. Let's get First Maccabees, 4th chapter. It sounds better. First Maccabees 4. And 61. And they set their garrison to keep it fortified, and fortified Bethsur to preserve it, that the people might have a defense against Idumea. So this holy day is associated, all right, with being delivered out of the hands of the Greeks, who are Edomites. Some will call themselves actual Edomites, some will call themselves Greeks, some will call themselves Romans. Either way, we got a victory over the Edomites. And again, it was an order that this should be kept in their season from year to year, right? So when you get the book of John, let's get the book of John, okay? The 10th chapter, maybe 11, but let's get John, the 10th chapter. Right. John 10 and 22, and it was at the feast of dedication, and it was winter. It's cold outside, right? NLT, it was now the winter, and Yahushua was in Jerusalem at the time of Hannukah, the festival of dedication. Okay, let's go to the Greek. Let's look up the feast of dedication.
Strong's G 1456. Echania.
In particular, the annual feast celebrated 8 days in the beginning of the 25th of Chislev, middle of our December. Okay, and we're in again, everything's thrown off. So we're in November, and I believe this holy day came in at sundown on November 24th. Okay, it says instituted by Judas Maccabeus in memory of the cleaning of the temple from the pollution of Antiochus Epiphanes. So this is actual history. And here it is. This is a holy day that Yahushua was at. He was celebrating it. He didn't rebuke it. See, these Christians want to tell you that Apocrypha is this and that. Don't listen to it. It's off. But here it is. Yahushua and the Jews are at a festival of Hannukah, celebrating the festival of dedication, man. It says he was in the temple walking through sections known as Solomon's colonnade. So again, and this is why I see those Jews thought that the temple was everything. The temple this, the temple that, because they, all right, are descendants of those who stood stiffly for the temple, man. But see, Yahushua is greater than the temple. See, and what he did for us is something the temple, all right, or any of the law, statutes, and commandments couldn't do, man. Okay, which we need Yahushua, man. That's why one greater than the temple. Let's get that. And this is why you have friction unto this day centered around the temple. Okay. As you have Sakari, they're saying in the kingdom we go build a new temple, and the Levites are gonna be no. We're not gonna need a temple. We're gonna be the temple. Yeah, we'll have altars. We have great buildings and all of that, but we're not gonna need a temple that fixates our relationship with the Most High on earth, as we will be the temple. We're gonna return to Eden, the original temple. Matthew 12 and 6. As a matter of fact, this whole chapter is dealing with the Jews were angry with Yahushua because his disciples worked on the Sabbath. As a matter of fact, let's just start at 1. And about that time, Yahushua was walking through some grain fields on the Sabbath, and his disciples were hungry, so they began breaking off some of the heads of the grain, eating them. But some of the Pharisees saw them and protested and said, "Look at your disciples breaking the law by harvesting grain on the Sabbath." Yahushua said unto them, "Haven't you read in the scriptures where David, all right, what David did when his companions were hungry? He went into the house of God, and his companions broke the law by eating sacred loaves of bread that only the high priests were allowed to eat. All right, the priests were allowed to eat. And haven't you read in the law of Moses that the priest, all right, that the priest on duty in the temple work on the Sabbath? I tell you that there is one here is even greater than the temple. But you wouldn't have not have condemned my innocent disciples if you knew the meaning of the scripture. I want you to show mercy and not offer sacrifice." So this back and forth between the temple, between the law and everything, extending into these times of the fourth beast, which is the Roman Empire. But anyway, that's it, man. Lord willing, y'all are edified on to the next. Shalom.